Thank you for joining us today on our annual pre-combine conference call with NFL Network lead draft analyst Daniel Jeremiah. As a note, we are recording this call and we will make audio of it available following its conclusion. Before I turn it over to DJ for his opening remarks and then questions, I wanted to highlight a few NFL Network coverage details for the combine. NFL Network provides live coverage of the 2026 NFL Scouting Combine, the 21st Combine covered by NFL Network, with on-field drills beginning Thursday, February 26th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time with the defensive linemen and linebackers, and continuing Friday, February 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time with the defensive backs and tight ends, Saturday, February 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs, and concluding Sunday, March 1st at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with the offensive linemen. DJ anchors NFL Network's coverage along with Rich Eisen, Charles Davis, Ian Rappaport, Stacey Dales, and Chris Rhodes. Fans can stream NFL Network's live coverage of combine on-field drills with NFL Plus, as well as live coverage of NFL head coach and general manager press conferences on Tuesday, February 24th, and Wednesday, February 25th. I will now turn it over to DJ for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate you guys hopping on here. I feel like we've got a good group that does this each and every year. So I do appreciate you guys' time. It's a lot of fun for me to get a chance to talk about these kids. It's another exciting class. With some of the strengths of this draft really being along the defensive line, particularly the edge rushers, another great group of wide receivers, the linebacker group that runs deep, and a corner group that runs really deep. So it's a good draft, and I'm excited to get to Indianapolis. It's it's interesting doing some of the homework this week and looking back on last year's combine and seeing some of the stars from that combine, have success throughout the rookie years and all the way to the Super Bowl, to be honest, with Gray Zabel, with how he handled the offseason, and Nick Emanwari, the job he did as well. So I do think it's a useful exercise to get there and watch these guys move around and work out, and really looking forward to it. So with that, I'm ready to go. Let's get going.
Our first question comes from Jim Wyatt with the Tennessee Titans. Jim, you may ask your question.
Okay, Daniel, appreciate it as always. How much debate do you think there will be with the edge rushers leading up to this draft? And is there any scenario where the Titans are having their choice there sitting at 4, or is it what I'm going to be going?
I think it's a really good group, and I'll get to the order of these guys and the debate that's going to exist. I will be a little surprised if we don't see one of them go. I think the Jets are a kind of a prime candidate to take one there at 2. Arizona, that's a possibility as well. I think between looking at the top tackles or the one of the top 1 or 2 edge rushers could factor in. But I think there's all different orders. It's particularly at the top. The big debate is these 3 guys with Arvell Reese and how you evaluate him. I like him on the edge. He's obviously spent a little more time off the ball at Ohio State, but a real dynamic player. David Bailey, provides a little more certainty just in terms of you've seen him play out there. You've seen the production. I think it's pretty easy to see how that translates. And I think that's why there's going to be teams that have him as the top guy. And then Rueben Bain is just, more kind of an identity pick who just plays so hard and so physical. The dimensions aren't going to be ideal in terms of the length, but there's more that he brings than just what shows up on the stat sheet, just the overall physicality and toughness that he plays with. I would say most people would have him as the 3rd, with a lot of debate there with those top 2 guys. And it comes down to really the potential of Arvell Reese versus what you've already seen. And you've got an elite fastball rusher with David Bailey. So I don't know if I'm the Titans. I'd be bummed if I ended up with any of those 3 guys at the end of the day. If they want to go edge rusher, they're going to have 3 good options, or at least one of those 3 options is going to be there.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Rob in NBC Philly. Rob, you may ask your question.
Daniel, thank you so much for doing this. My question regards the Eagles, and Dallas Goedert's a free agent. So I'm wondering about Kenyon Sadiq and whether he compares to guys like Loveland and Warren that we saw last year, and what the chances of the Eagles taking a tight end might be with that first pick. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I don't see them going in that direction. I think Sadiq's a talented player, but he's not in the same grade for me as those guys you just mentioned from last year with Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren. He's just not going to be as big. He's going to be around 6'3", 245 pounds. Those guys are just bigger guys. He's gonna run like crazy. He's gonna jump out of the gym, super dynamic, super explosive. Really good. Someone who can take quick screens from the tight end position and do things with it, with the explosiveness and the ability to just run away from everybody. And then you'll see him on a lot of runaway routes, a lot of wheels. But I don't think he's as polished as either Loveland or Warren in terms of running a full complement of routes that you'd want from the tight end position. And it's just not really. I don't think that's Howie's MO. I look at where they are offensive line wise. I know Lane said he's coming back, or I saw that report at least he was coming back. But that's something you're looking forward in the future. You got to find that eventual replacement there. We'll see what happens in the offseason with Landon Dickerson as well. So to me, offensive line for the Eagles seems a little bit more likely in a place they could go. And then you look at where they are with some of their other picks. They're picking 54 and 68. So in the second and third round, I think there's going to be opportunities for a tight end at that point in time. And a guy that I like in that range would be a guy like Max Clare from Ohio State, who transferred from Purdue. This year didn't have the production I think he would have liked there at Ohio State, but there's a lot of mouths to feed. I think when you go back and watch him at Purdue, you can see, the ability he has, a little more of a traditional guy. He reminded me a little bit of Sam Laporta when I watched him, just with some of the the burst, the fluidity, his ability to really go get the ball. That was someone I really liked, kind of in that range, second round range.
Our next question comes from Doug Farrar. Doug, you may ask your question.
Obviously, more and more teams in the NFL want to do it all DB. Good luck with that. But the Derwin, Hamilton, and Worry. I wanted to ask you about three guys. Downs, obviously. McNeil Warren from Toledo and Dylan Tieneman from Oregon, how you project them as legit do-it-all DBs at the NFL level, and if there's anyone else in this class you see maybe becoming that guy.
Well, I love the question, and it is something I think teams are looking for, having guys that can do what those three do in terms of bigger nickels, guys that can play in that role and be force players and cover tight ends and blitz, do a lot of different things with them. But I love all three of those safeties. I had all three in my initial top 25 in this draft, and I think once I update it, going through this weekend, I don't see any of them going down, only potentially going up. But with Caleb Downs, everything he does, he just kind of does right. He doesn't have the size that those other three guys you're referencing do, just in terms of the size and the length. I don't think he's quite as explosive as those players are, but you can cover tight ends. He can do that easily. He's an outstanding force player. So you got somebody on the field that can be a real reliable, firm tackler, takes great angles. I think he can be a communicator back there as well, just not quite as much playmaking. To me, McNeil Warren is the one that's the most intriguing of all these guys, who's, he's going to be, when they had him measured in the spring, he was 6'3 and 3/8, 209 pounds. So he's a little bit of that bigger, longer, rangier guy who's got incredible ball skills, can play in the middle of the field. He's got a real presence and physicality over the middle. You can see all the, the plays in the ball, which are impressive. Like the pick six against Western Kentucky, that it's pretty dynamic. He just pulls the trigger and plays really, really fast. And when I've watched Derwin doing the Charger games, he's just bounces around. He's just got a lot of energy to him with how he's used and how he plays. And the closer he gets to the line of scrimmage, the more energy he provides. I see some of that with McNeil Warren. And then Thieneman from Oregon, you're going to start seeing the buzz on him start to really, really build as we get to Indy. He's going to run a heck of a lot faster than people think. He's going to jump out of the gym. He is super, super explosive. And you go back to Purdue, and when he was there as a true freshman, playing in the dead middle of the field, making interceptions outside the numbers with that type of range. And now you get to Oregon, he can cover in the slot, can be a legit nickel and mirror and match smaller, quicker guys. Another guy who's, trusts his eyes, flat-footed reads, great angles, excellent tackler. I think those three guys are three of the best players in the draft, not just three of the best safeties. I think they're going to be in high demand. And then, an interesting guy that I'm keeping an eye on as we go through this process is Jacoby Thomas from Miami. He would be kind of in that next wave. You get to him, Bud Clark from TCU, AJ Halsey from LSU. There's another good group of safeties behind him, but there is a little bit, those are the big three. There's a little bit of a gap before you get to the rest of these guys.
Our next question comes from Nate Davis with USA Today. Nate, you may ask your question.
Thanks, DJ. I'll ask the quarterback question. I think we all kind of know where Mendoza's going. I just was kind of hoping you could kind of contextualize maybe this class back to maybe 23 or so, the Bryce Young Stroud year. And then specifically, I was curious about how Ty Simpson kind of slots in. I think you kind of telegraphed that he's got maybe a lot of money to make over the next couple of weeks or not. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll start with Ty Simpson. I think he probably has the most at stake between where we are today and when we get to the draft. Just, is someone who I think most teams will have as the second quarterback. It's not really, so much is he number two. It's just how high of a pick is he worthy of? Is he worthy of a first round pick? And when you have the limited number of starts that he has, teams are going to have to get comfortable with that. And one of the ways they can do that is by watching him, move around and throw and getting a better feel for his physical skill set. And then probably more importantly, just meeting with him and seeing how he understands the game. Son of a coach, I think he'll do really well in that environment. But to try and, get beyond that start issue, which is a real thing. So I think he's got a lot at stake as we go through the rest of the process. For me, I have him as, he's in the, 30s, 40s range for me as just a pure grade. But I wouldn't be stunned if he ended up going in the first round because there's enough teams in need of the position. And I do think he'll be impressive going from this point forward. I just wish, at the end of the year, he wasn't healthy. I thought he played a little bit small when he got in crowds, in some of those games late in the year, and just don't know how much to attribute that to the injuries versus, he got exposed a little bit at that point in time. So a lot of homework left to do on him, but I think he's clearly the second quarterback in this draft class. And then, comparing Mendoza with the Bryce Young, CJ Stroud draft, I would have him, just off of the college grade, just a tick above those guys for me. So I would place Mendoza over him. I would put him behind, the group we had a couple years ago, those top three guys. For me, it was Caleb 1, it was May 2, Jaden Daniels 3. He would slot in behind those guys. But I think he's excellent. I think he's ready to go. He's incredibly tough. The stuff with him, I know talking to people early on, it was the Indiana offense and it's RPOs, the ball's out, it's back shoulders and not much else. And then you go through and study him and you watch all the 3rd and 7+ throws that he makes and tight windows and hanging in and taking big shots and showing his toughness. And then you look at him in the red zone and you look at him in key moments in big games, and I don't really know how you could have too much of a concern there. So I think he's an excellent player, and that's where I, kind of had him evaluated through the process.
Next question comes from Shireen Williams. Shireen, you may ask your question.
Thank you. Daniel, I know you can't, I'm doing something on last year's draft. You can't judge a draft on 1 year, but what did you think overall of that draft, and what were maybe some surprises in that draft, either good or bad?
Well, I thought we might see a little more impact from, all those defensive players. It was a really good defensive draft going into it. And I know we didn't quite get the production out a lot of those young players. I think there's an opportunity to see big growth here in the second year. To me, like the storylines in that draft, Abdul Carter, his pressure numbers are great, but, I thought he'd jump right in and have double-digit sacks and really kind of have some dominant moments, which I think that's still to come with him. There was a ton of talk, obviously, and a lot of attention on Travis Hunter and how he'd be able to, handle the two-way duty, and that didn't quite go as planned. And it sounds like there's already been a little bit of an adjustment there. But I'm still excited about a lot of these guys. I mean, Eamon Wari was my 15th player last year and ended up going in the second round, and we saw what he did going through the Super Bowl and how dominant he was. Tedero McMillan played great. He played even better than I thought he would. I would label that as a little bit of a surprise, just how quickly he emerged as a number one wideout in the league. But to me, I'm bullish on this class. I think it's just maybe we didn't get quite the instant impact that we thought we might get. I think Cam Ward with the fresh group there has got a chance to be a really, really good quarterback. I think Brian Daboll will be good for him. So I'm still excited about it. But yeah, I'd say there's maybe a little disappointed just with the early returns.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question comes from Dan Ralph. Dan, you may ask your question.
Great. Thank you, Daniel, as always. Two-part question, if I may. We have two Canadians in the combine this week with Akeem Mesidor and Logan Taylor. I wonder if you could break down both of them, what they have to do. Can they enhance their positioning? Because I see you've got Akeem very highly rated. How can a guy like Logan, what can he do this week to sort of raise his stock?
Yeah, I'll start with Logan. Checks in at the All-Star game. He was over 6'6", 305 pounds. He's a little bit older, as is Mesidor. He's 25. Or 24, I should say. Mesidor is 25. With Logan, I like the fact that he can play inside and outside, playing right guard and right tackle. Thought he was a little better inside. Thought there were times where he got edged a little bit. Some of that just because of the foot quickness and just kind of being average there. Thought he had a solid anchor. He gave up a bunch of sacks. He gave up 7 sacks, but I think to me, you keep him inside, you give him some neighbors to play with, and that'll help. But how he can help himself, yeah, I think just showing that he's quicker than you might think. That's going to be an area that's of concern. So, how does he get through the shuttle drills? How does he go through the field workout? I think there's an opportunity for him to help himself there. And then Mesidor, he's one of my favorite players in the whole draft. He plays outside, he plays inside. It's just not fair with him against college guards. He just kills them in there. Violent club moves. He's got knockback power. He can widen and bull on the edge. You'll see push-pull moves. I just wrote, this guy never stops. Like, there's just never a breath you can take when you're trying to block Akeem Mesidor. He's an absolute warrior. So he's older. That's another conversation that I think teams are going to have. I just go back over the last few years and see guys who were older, and obviously the quarterback position is different, but Tyler Shuck, Bo Nix, I don't think there's any regrets with those teams, with those picks. I look at a guy like Craig Woodson last year with the Patriots, is a little bit older. Well, he's plug and play and played great. Peyton Wilson, linebacker for the Steelers, a little bit older. I don't think they have any regrets there either. So I think the age thing in years past may be a bigger issue. In this particular draft, we have a lot of 24 and 25-year-olds, and I think teams are going to look beyond that.
Terrific. Thank you.
Next question comes from Jordan Rodriguez. Jordan, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, thanks for doing this.
Good to hear your voice.
Two-part question, if you don't mind. When you were a scout and you were starting to build your reports, where did you start and how did that report shape and evolve over time as the evaluation did?
That's a great question. I always tried to think of the report of, you do the background information, which is, you're going through and talking to all your sources at the school and getting all the character, the weight room stuff, the academic advisor, trying to get a feel for the person. That's in its own separate category. But in terms of the body of the report where you're evaluating the player, I like to be able to show how he does in the run phase of the game, either side of the ball. Like, let's show how he is in that world. How does he play against the run? What does he do? How does he perform in that area? Then I go how he does in the pass game, and looking at how he's playing right now. And then I look at it from an athletic component. Where is he at athletically right, at this point in time? And then finally, the end of the summary is you're just projecting what, now that we have this information, what he does run and pass, how he is athletically, and the competitiveness ties into that world as well. And then you're just projecting what does he do for us specifically. And that's one of the differences in the media side of it versus when I was with the team. With the team, it's actually a lot easier because you can say, this is how we will use this player. These are the operating instructions for, what he would be for us. It's a little more difficult when you don't really have that scheme or team or environment to scout to. So that's kind of the way, I always approached it and kind of the way I was taught there in Baltimore.
And then as you talk to teams and you do it yourself as well, in your evaluations, how has technology changed the way that, like, the process of the reports are filed, or have you heard of teams and the different technology that they use, how that's changed, I think, quite dramatically over time?
Yeah, there's definitely shorthand. There's a lot of stuff, and you would probably have good information on it because I know the Rams are at the forefront of it. I know Jacksonville's taken that. I know the Lions have done that. So that's kind of off of Les's tree a little bit. But being able to just kind of have, phrases you can grab almost from a bank, so you can just kind of plug that in that way. That's become a new way of doing it, and not having to go through 9 million, position specific. We used to have boxes, so we'd have like each player. If you're a wide receiver, we might have 8 to 10 position specific traits where we'd have to give them a number grade and then have little, write up in each of those individual boxes, which took forever. Well, now it sounds like there's kind of, look, there's only certain types of things you're going to see from a wide receiver. So to be able to just kind of pull that from a bank, I think is pretty valuable. And that also allows you to run a lot more reports and analytics based off of, when we find guys that we've said offensive linemen that are, struggle to anchor. Well, that's, now that we've looked back 5 years, that's been a major issue, and those guys haven't overcome that. It's a lot easier to run reports and learn from your hits and your misses.
I appreciate it, DJ. Thank you.
Sure.
Next question comes from D. Orlando Ledbetter. D, you may ask your question.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Daniel. For what how's the depth in the draft for the teams that are picking? They don't have a first round pick at defensive tackle, cornerback, and wide receiver.
I would rank that wide receiver, corner, D tackle in terms of the depth, but it's not in bad shape at defensive tackle. It's just much deeper at the other two. Wide receiver is really, really good. It's comparable to the last several years. I think I ended up counting it up the other day. I think I had 19 guys with grades that would put them in the top 3 round range. So that's a really good group of wide receivers. Corners, we got a nice mix of outside guys and one of the really, really good groups of slot corners that I've seen in the last few years. So good, not quite as deep as we've been in some other years, but really solid there with again, a really nice mix of slot corners. And then the defensive tackles, it's not as deep as the edge rusher group in this draft, but there's some real intriguing guys, with some traits. A lot of 320 plus pound guys. Once you get into that, outside the first round and maybe into that late second round to fourth round, I think it's a nice little sweet spot there where you got some real big guys in there. And as teams are playing with more shell coverage, and just about everybody is, and they want to stop the run with fewer bodies, I think the presence of these 300 plus pound DTs, why they might not be, big time upside pass rush players, I think they're starting to have a little more value again.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Stu Jackson with the Rams. Stu, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, kind of along the lines of what D was just asking, what are the skill sets or traits in your mind that define the cornerback and safety classes this year, and how, if at all, does that influence your evaluation of, say, a team like the Rams doubling down on the secondary with McNeil, Warren, and Hood in your recent mock draft?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got guys who do different things. There's some real versatility there. And I've had a lot of conversations with teams about, okay, I love this player. How do we use him? And that's where the challenge comes in. And we've got a lot of new coaches that have moved around the league. So I think that's going to be kind of a key in this draft, is those guys getting together with the personnel department and having a plan for these guys when they bring them in. But you've got outside, some pure outside guys like at the top with Delane from LSU, McCoy, who was awesome in 24 before the injury, missing this year. Both those guys have really, really good, body control. They're fluid. They stay connected. They can play the ball. Really, really complete players. Hood, I think, is I pulled him down my list a little bit, but he's still a really good player, bottom one. And you've got Cisse from South Carolina, who's going to run blazing fast and is a really talented player. But the nickels, to me, like Avian Terrell from Clemson, Keontae Scott, who I think is going to play in there, Kilgore from South Carolina, D'Angelo Pons from Indiana, like all those guys are, they're all like second, maybe you get one of those guys drifts into the third. I'd put Keith Abney from Arizona State just behind them. It's a really, really good group of those guys that can, day one nickels. And then, of all those guys, the names that you mentioned, I go back to it a little bit. I'm pretty fired up about McNeil Warren, just with, the things he can do and the physicality and the size that he has.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Tony Grossi. Tony, you may ask your question.
Hey, Daniel, offensive tackles. What is the gap between Monroe, Freeling, and the top two? And how does an offensive tackle make up a gap in this pre-draft process?
Yeah, I don't look, Monroe Freeling's going to have a lot of love, as we go through the rest of the process. I don't think it's that big of a gap there with him and the top guys. I really like Blake Miller. I would say most teams would have Monroe Freeling over Blake Miller, but I don't think, you're talking about, just off the way I see him, you're talking about the top two guys who are my 12th and 13th players, and the next three really 23, 24, 28, 29, even with the next one. So there's a big clump of them there. And how do you close the gap? Well, I think a lot of it's going to be, meeting with these teams, and, how well do you understand it? How do they feel comfortable with you in terms of your ability to absorb what you're giving them and instruction. I think the Zoom meetings that they have now is incredibly valuable that we didn't have before with scouting. You used to have to fly out and visit with the kid. Now you can just hop on Zoom, pull up game tape, and go over it. So they'll have a chance to meet and discuss those things with teams. And, the physical testing is still plays a role. I mean, I think Gray Zabel last year jumped 36.5 inches, which was pretty freaky and showed how explosive he was. So I'm anxious to watch these guys kind of move around a little bit, see how they do in that regard. But I don't think it's some sizable gap where it's going to be you're the 40th, ranked player and you got to get up to surpass the guy who's the 5th ranked player. I think it's a little bit closer than that. I wouldn't put that top order to sleep just yet.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Eric Williams. Eric, you may ask your question. Eric Williams. Eric, you may ask your question.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this, DJ. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Hey, you mentioned where you had in Mendoza in terms of the 2023 and 24 classes. Where would he rank if he would have came out last year with that group? And then what do you feel like is his top trait or asset?
Sure. I gave him the same grade that I gave Cam Ward. So it would be that you could not be any more kind of polar opposites as players, where Cam Ward, it was kind of the magic, the off schedule magic that he had to go along with just kind of a loose fluid motion. Everything he did was just so smooth. He'd kind of fade away and throw the ball wherever he wanted. Whereas Mendoza a little more robotic in his movement than Cam, but still has a strong arm. I think he's does a really, really good job of protecting the football. Both of them excelled in the RPO game. I think you'd want to have an element of that in your offense if you're Kubiak, just because he's so comfortable and such a great decision maker there. But the best attribute that he has, to be honest with you, Eric, I'd say is his toughness. Like I think if you go through and look at all these great quarterbacks over the years, I've always harped on poise, being a big part of it. And the Hall of Famers, I did a study a long time ago, and you see all different sizes. You'll see different arm strength. You'll see different athleticism, but they all had a poise to them. And that's also, has to do with the toughness. When you get drilled early in the game, as he did a couple times, and you don't see any rattle to him at all, he just kind of, he locks back in. There's kind of a mental and a physical toughness to him that I think that's going to serve him well. And I would imagine with Tom Brady in the building, as someone who had a reputation for both the mental and physical toughness, that those traits will be appreciated.
Cool. Appreciate it, DJ.
Yep.
Next question comes from Drew Mentalk with Irish Illustrated. Drew, you may ask your question.
You recently noted on Twitter that you finished Billy Schrauth's tape, and his play against USC was excellent. Did you watch any of his other games at Notre Dame, and what stood out to you about him, both good and bad, and what measurables does he need to be a potential day 2 pick?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with him is you have some up and down play, and you have the injuries like that. I think it was left MCL that happened in that USC game. But I saw somebody that in the run game has got knockoff power. He can drive and finish. He plays with really good awareness. I thought there were some times in some of the pass protection, you'll see him get a little bit over aggressive and lunge a little bit. I think that's correctable. I just think he's got a lot in his body. I'm anxious to see truly how big he is. I just have estimates 6'4", 310. So I'm curious to see what that looks like. But, to me, the positives are you got somebody who's got some real lower body explosiveness and power. The negatives on the ground a little bit and, can get a little over aggressive and get over his skis. So those kind of the positive negatives. But the USC tape, like in terms of the ability to drive and finish guys, was one of the better, run blocking games that I saw from these interior guys. I have a grade on him that puts him kind of in that third, fourth round. We'll see how he is and how big he is. I don't know that for sure, but I thought he had, potential starter ability.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from David Feronas. David, you may ask your question.
Hi, DJ. I saw you had Mansour Delane going to the Dolphins in your latest mock. Beyond a need for a young corner in Miami, what do you like about his fit there for Sullivan, Hafley, that duo there?
Yeah, I think they'll appreciate the fact that he's scheme diverse. He's someone if you want to play him in press, he's really, really smooth. He can flip and open up real easy. You want to play him in off. He's a fluid mover. He can really see things top down and drive and make plays on the football. He got a little bored when I was watching him, quite honestly, because teams just stopped going in his direction. But I thought he's someone that's a loose, fluid, smooth athlete with toughness that's scheme diverse. The only true question on him is, do you really see him get, really challenged and have to recover and show big time speed, top speed? That'll be something. I don't have the GPS numbers yet. I haven't got my hands on them from the teams that have that, and we'll see how he runs in Indianapolis. But that would be kind of the only real question there. He's someone that could really fit in any scheme.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Bob McMenamin. Bob, you may ask your question.
Daniel, thanks a lot. Back to the quarterbacks. Assuming the Cardinals make a day 2 pick for one of those guys that could be available still, would you factor in much of the McVay-Shanahan coaching tree with Mike LaFleur here connected to one of those guys? And if so, of those 2 or 3 guys, who are they and why would you think they might make sense in Arizona?
That's a good question. Those guys in that next tier. So Ty Simpson, I think would fit great in there. We'll see, where he ends up going. If he ends up going in the first round, then that would take that off the table. But pick 34, it's about right where I have him. So if he were there at that point in time, I think that would be a really solid pick. That next group of guys you're talking about, to me, it's three guys for me, which is Aller, Nussmeier, Carson Beck. Aller and Beck kind of like pure pocket, big guys. Movement's not going to be a huge part of what they do. I mean, they can move around a little bit, but that's not really what they do. Garrett Nussmeier, a little undersized. He's not an elite athlete either, but kind of reminding me of an Andy Dalton style of player with a compact delivery. He's decisive. He's got enough arm. He doesn't need a ton of foot space. He's going to be able to direct traffic and set fronts and the set protections and those things. So son of a coach, he's going to be really solid in that area. And I have heard Aller's done a really good job or will do a really good job in that regard as well. So in terms of how that fits within that system, I don't know that there's outside of Ty Simpson, I don't know that there is an ideal fit with the rest of that group. I might be more willing at that point in time if Ty Simpson was gone to see who's kind of left for me in the following round.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Mike Chappell in Indianapolis. Mike, you may ask your question.
Daniel, how are you?
Good.
Looking forward to having some good weather for you next week.
I know. I saw later in the week. It looks nice, right?
Yeah, come here now. It's like 70, so but whatever. Two questions. One is when teams miss on quarterbacks at the top, I would almost include Anthony Richardson in there. Is that more of a team failure, or what have you attributed that to? The Sam Darnold's and Baker Mayfield or whatever. And secondly, with the Colts having no first round pick, do they get more value at maybe a receiver or defensive line where they got to start remaking?
Yeah, great question. I don't know there's a perfect answer to who's to blame when it doesn't work out with quarterbacks that are picked high. I like to use a simple formula, and it's just the way I look at it. And I'm not saying this is the right way or the wrong way. I've just looked at it in terms of, if you're an organization, have you provided the 3 Ps for your young quarterback? And that is, have I given him a good play caller? Have I, provided protection with an offensive line? Haven't I given him some guys who can make plays and some playmakers? If I've done all those things, if I've got a guy who knows how to call offense, I've invested in the offensive line, and we got guys who can make plays, and it doesn't work out, well, then I'm going to say we got the wrong guy. And it is what it is. But I would say the vast majority of times when it doesn't work out with a young quarterback for a team picking up there, one of the reasons you're picking up there is because you're at least missing, one of the two in terms of the protection and the playmakers. And, hopefully you have the right play caller. But I think that's where you could say organizations fail a lot of these young guys. Is you don't really have a fighting chance if you don't have those things in place. So that's kind of how I look at it in terms of the second round. There's wide receivers galore that are going to be there. They're really, really good players that I think, it's literally all shapes and sizes. We'll see what happens there. They've got a big free agent. So, and I think Pierce, and just talking to teams, I think he'll have a robust market if he were to get out of the building. So if you're trying to replace some of that, kind of that size element, that big play element downfield, Denzel Boston's going to go in the first round. Malachi Fields probably goes in the second round in that range. But you've got guys who can get down the field. We'll see what happens with Chris Brazzell from Tennessee. He's a big guy. If you're looking for those big guys to try and replace him, and then you've got some real, good undersized players that I like, and Antonio Williams from Clemson. You got Zach Branch from Georgia who can fly. Jeremy Bernard from Alabama, can do a little bit of everything. So there's a lot of guys. A mid-round, like third round guy I would throw out there. I'm a Malik Benson fan from Oregon who's got big speed. So if they do lose Pierce, they'll have some options to go get some help.
Appreciate it, DJ.
Yep.
Next question comes from Phil Perry. Phil, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, sort of a little bit of a follow-up, I guess, to Mike's question, but I'm curious how you'd approach this offseason if you're in that Patriots front office, knowing the season that Drake May just had. I know you gave them a defensive player in your most recent mock. Did you weigh it all, maybe adding to, one of those 3 Ps for Drake May in the draft? Or was he so impressive to you that maybe he could kind of make up for what they don't have on that side of the ball, and you just start adding to other portions of your club?
Well, we can just tie it together. You just take Pierce to start with. So, apologies to Mike, but you take Pierce and you plug him into the Patriots, and that solves one of those issues. But no, I think they definitely need to get more weapons. And you can do that in free agency as well as a draft. I don't know that they need to expend a first round pick there. I do know when you look at the roster construction of the teams in the Super Bowl, and really kind of the best defenses, a lot of those defensive linemen are high tickets in the draft. Like, you can find them there. Whereas I think you can find some wideouts in day 2, even beyond day 2 in a draft like this one. So I would try and invest in that if at all possible. If there's a name that you really like that's there at the end of one, I think that might be the most bang for your buck, is just getting one of those edge rushers at that point in time. And knowing full well we've got free agency ahead of time to get a wide receiver and a weapon. We can get offensive linemen. I think some interior offensive linemen, second, third round is an opportunity to help yourself there as well. So that's why I just think if you look through the league right now and look at teams with needs heading into the draft, you'd be hard pressed to find many that don't have edge rusher on there. So even though we've got a boatload of them, they're going to fly off the board. So I say just get one.
Great. Thanks, DJ.
Yep.
Next question comes from Dave Burkett. Dave, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ. Always appreciate it.
No problem.
So Lions question. They need a center, obviously. Want to know how long in this draft can a team wait to find a center who can maybe start in year 1? And I could be wrong. I don't think you had any centers in your top 50. So unless you have one of those guys as a conversion candidate, like, how would you approach that position if you were Detroit? Free agency, draft, move Tate Ratledge, or something else?
Yeah, it looks like. I mean, look, there's a lot of jobs that are great. I love my job, but if I could switch jobs for just the next couple months, I'd want to be Tyler Linderbaum's agent, because everybody that I talk to seems to be in on Tyler Linderbaum. So it sounds like he's going to have a robust market. Congratulations to him and his family. Look, there's some good guys, some like third round type players. And there's guys that are interior players with, like, where would you have some experience there? But look, Sam Hecht from Kansas State, I think, can start day one. He probably goes in the late second, early third round range. Jake Slaughter from Florida, I think, would have a chance as a third round pick to come in and get on the field right away. Trey Zune played primarily, left tackle, but has some center experience at A&M. Maybe that takes a little while, but he's graded for me in that same range. As guys who'd have a chance to play pretty early. So I think there's a decent group of centers there. I don't know that there's one that I would, jump on the table for to take, in the second round, maybe a little bit of a reach there. But I think you can get one of those guys at that point in time, or you can trade back, whatever you want to do there. But I think those guys that I mentioned all have a chance to start.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question comes from Patrick Finley. Patrick, you may ask your question.
Hey DJ, how are you?
Good.
Good. The Bears are drafting 25. They're not used to drafting this late lately. If they need a left tackle or an edge rusher, is there a starter to be found there? If so, who could it be? And at what point do you just go best available, kind of the way this draft is shaping up?
Yeah, I'm always a fan of going best available. Which is hilarious. It's always a great discussion because, you take for need or best available. I'm like, well, a lot of teams stack their board based off need so they can justify taking best available. It's like, come on, guys. But no, there's going to be tackles. There's going to be both there. They're in a great spot for those two positions. Tackles, I think you see, one of those guys is going to be there. And, you've got a group of them there, from Blake Miller, Monroe Freeling, Proctor from Alabama, Lomu from Utah. I would say even Max Ianachor is in that range now out of Arizona State. I had him. He was my 41st player going into the Senior Bowl. He was awesome there. And plus, he's a big physical dude. So whose best football is ahead of him. So he could start getting into that range of the draft as well. So out of that clump, I can't envision all of them are gone. So you're going to get one of those guys who would be, able to plug and play, in my opinion. And then you look at those edge rushers. It'll be fascinating to see what happens. With Mesor, we talked about a little bit older, but a great player. Cassius Howell, he's going to be an interesting case study because he's got all this production. He's just over 6'2", 254 pounds. He's going to have really, really short arms. And there's teams, people can say it's no big deal. Teams care about it. So that'll be interesting. And then you take the short arm part of it. And then I think he might run in the low 4.5s, potentially even faster than that. He's a freak in terms of how explosive he is. But he's going to be kind of in that range. And then, Keldrick Falk is someone I think teams are all over the map on. He's got this ideal frame. He's young. He's almost 6'6", 274 pounds. Plays inside, plays outside, real smooth mover. He's great against the run. Just doesn't have, an elite get off or urgency as a rusher, and doesn't have a ton of production. So you balance that out with he's really, really young and has an NFL body. And by all accounts, talking to folks at Auburn, his character and intangibles off the charts. So I think you see a wide range of where he goes. But that's a good group of guys there. And then even TJ Parker from Clemson, R. Mason Thomas from Oklahoma, Zion Young, you're going to start seeing a lot of those guys get, talked about in that portion of the draft. They're in a good spot. There's some years where you're need and where you're picking and you're like, oh crap, we better move one way or another. I think they can just sit right where they are and see how it falls.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Angelique Shingalis from Michigan. You may ask your question.
Thanks so much. Yeah, definitely asking about Michigan, of course, and just your impressions, Daniel, of this group, and particularly I think Derek Moore and Barham and Klein, and whether if there's a spot for Max Bredesen.
Sure. Yeah, I'll run through them here real quick. Derek Moore, first of all, he had the best rep at the Senior Bowl. where you could see just how explosive and powerful he is. He's got the production with 12 sacks. He's got an array of moves, quick swipe. He's got strong hands. He can, kind of rip and flatten to the quarterback. He plays hard. Him and Barham both play really hard, and he can, he can really dominate tight ends at the point of attack. He's in the second round range for me. With Barham, not as much production with the 4 sacks, short, quick steps. He's someone who can dip under blocks. He can, again, dominate tight ends. I don't think they're allowed to get blocked by tight ends at Michigan. He can really close backside, and they kind of, use him as a joker and kind of move him around and let him blitz. Just a lot of twitch and plays really, really hard. He's someone in that he's going to me, second, third round range, probably bottom 2 to the middle of the third round range. And Klein, he's got an ideal frame as a tight end. He's got speed off the line. He can really, he can pluck the ball away from his body. You see him on the move. I think he's at his best, like wheel route. You'll see a touchdown. I don't love him working back to the quarterback, getting in and out of breaks in that regard. But, he's good after the catch with speed. You'll see him hurdle guys. There's upside there. I don't think he's who he's going to be. I think there's more there. Third round again for him is where I had him. And then 2 other guys I'll mention real quick. Rayshon Benny. I liked what I saw from him going through the end of the year. He's got 33.5-inch arms. He can play a couple different spots inside. He's really, really strong at the point of attack. Not a big time pass rusher, but someone who I think has real value against the run. 3rd, 4th round. And then Bredesen is a fun player. Just, you got to figure out what you want to do with him as a wing, as a fullback, H-back. He's a really, really good blocker, can latch, drive, and finish. They love to use him and kind of motion him away and let him just tee off on guys on the split zone stuff that they run. Just a blue collar player. 2 catches for 11 yards doesn't look great on paper, but I actually really enjoyed watching him because he was so nasty and tough.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next question comes from Matt Paris in New Orleans. Matt, you may ask your question.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, DJ. As you're the Saints at 8, just wondering, as you're kind of looking to build this around Tyler Shuck, in your latest mock, I think you had a receiver over Jeremiah Love. Does that come down to positional value? How would you kind of build around Shuck if you were the Saints, specifically at 8?
Yeah, I think there's still, more pieces to add there. Obviously, I like the young tackles that they have. That would be a great decision to have if you have, a guy like Mekhi Lemon there and then Jeremiah Love. I think I had put Jeremiah Love there previously. So I wanted to see what it would look like there and try and find a complement to Chris Olave. I think he would catch a bazillion balls in that offense from that quarterback with Kellen calling plays. I think he would know exactly how to use Mekhi Lemon, and he'll give you easy completions for a young quarterback. He can work in the middle of the field. He's tough. He can help you out if you need him to dig out a linebacker in the run game as well. So that was kind of looking at a different option there. I don't know that there's a wrong answer. Jeremiah Love, is someone who can impact the passing game as well as a true home run hitter. I always Jeremiah Love's one of my top players in the draft. I think he's my 2nd or 3rd overall player. But on the running back thing, yeah, he's my 2nd player. There is something to, okay, when the team is ready to really take off, then you drop in the running back. So you utilize all of his carries. They all matter and they're helping you, get in the playoffs and chase a championship. I think there's some other pieces to fill before you say that, rocket's ready to take off there in New Orleans. So I kind of like the idea of letting Mekhi Lemon, grow with a young quarterback and they can play together for, 7-10 years or so. I just thought that would be a fun fit.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Ray Fittipaldo in Pittsburgh. Ray, you may ask your question.
Hey, Daniel, knowing that the Steelers accumulated all those comp picks to probably try to go get a QB this year, if you're Omar, what do you do now with all those picks? I think they're going to get 12, probably not a quarterback. So what's your game plan if you're Omar?
Yeah, I think there's some things you need to accomplish, in the draft, but I also think there's 2 other options. I think you have ammunition to go get a veteran player. You want to trade for a veteran, that 3rd round pick will score you a really, really nice piece historically in the trade market. So you could plug a hole that way. You could try and, use one of those picks to accumulate picks next year where at least on the surface this far out looks like it could be one of the best drafts, we've seen in a very long time, with high premium, high end talent. And if you don't feel like your quarterback of the future is in this draft, getting another lottery ticket next year would make some sense, just to give yourself more ammunition. So I think those are two options they could go with. I do think they need to get some receiver help on this team. I think you can look at them at the corner position as well. So they've done a really good job of the last few years investing in offensive linemen, and I think they've got some really good young pieces there. You look on the defensive line, I like what they have there with some really good young pieces. So to me, this feels weird to say for the Steelers, but it feels like kind of a perimeter off season, getting better on the perimeter.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Ryan Dunleavy. Ryan, you may ask your question. Ryan.
Hey, Daniel, thanks for doing this.
No problem.
You teased it earlier, but with Ty Simpson, but why do you think it seems like the college start stat has revived here those last 5 years? I know that started with Parcells years ago, but then it went away. Why do you think that what is the magic number, so to speak? Why has that come back? And does that exist at any other position, Daniel? Like for offensive line, maybe? Is that a thing too, where if you only have X number of starts, you can't be trusted right away in the NFL?
Oh, it's always just going to make you feel more comfortable, when you have more starts, there's just more evaluate. And I remember back in the day, we used to make a big deal about, I think it was when I was in Baltimore, and we had drafted Tony Pashos. This is a bazillion years ago. I think he was out of Illinois. And we took him late, and he was big, and he was a little bit stiff, but he had started a zillion games in the Big Ten. And we were like, guys that start a million games along the offensive line in the Big Ten, they just seem to stick. They're tough, they're smart. They kind of work around whatever deficiencies they may have. So we used to always, point to that with the offensive line. With quarterbacks, I think it's always been important, but I think the difference now is because you're not paying these guys as much as we were in the previous era, going back to the Stafford, Bradford era, that teams now are quicker to move on. That, there's look at all the conversation around JJ McCarthy that's taken place already this off season. It's been it feels like he's barely got on the field, but people are like, okay, we gotta, we could move in another direction. You couldn't do that because of salary implications in years past. Now it's like no harm, no foul. If it doesn't work out, you just go back and get another one. So you want him when they get there. What I'm getting at is you're not going to be able to have a lot of time to develop them. So you need a lot of that development to have taken place at the college level. And, the Joe Burrow you saw at Ohio State, even the Joe Burrow you saw his first year at LSU was not the Joe Burrow you saw his final year. The Bo Nix you saw at Auburn was not the Bo Nix that we saw at Oregon. I can go on and on. Jalen Hurts from Alabama to Oklahoma. These guys all benefited from getting all that work. And then on the flip side, obviously McCarthy didn't play a ton. You look at Trey Lance, who did not have a ton of experience there. So we've seen some guys who haven't worked out. So I think it's kind of all those things together of why you care. And I've mentioned this before, but for all the the issues that have popped up in college football and a lot of complaints with how things have changed and NIL and the transfer portal, what doesn't get discussed at all, and I think is a massive deal from the scouting standpoint, is the the realignment that took place. If you're watching a quarterback in the SEC or the Big Ten, you're watching him against elite competition, five or six times during the regular season. And if they make a postseason run, you might get 2, 3, 4 more games of that. So it just, the more you can see of a player, the more comfortable you're going to be with who he is, and the more confident you'll be in your evaluation. So that's kind of where that comes from. And now with Ty, there's the first 6 or 7 games, he was excellent, making good decisions, accurate layer throws, processing so well. And then whether it was a combination of injuries, no running game, the offensive line not being great, but he didn't play well coming down the stretch. So when you see that, you don't have another 3 or 4 years worth of good tape to forgive that and to be comfortable with it. It's kind of like, well, gosh, I'm getting ready to take the guy in the first round, and I've only seen really 7, really, really good games. That's where teams get a little bit nervous.
Thanks, DJ.
Yep.
Next question comes from Andrew Mason. Andrew, you may ask your question.
Hey DJ, you have CJ Allen mocked to the Broncos at number 30. Wondering what you like about him as a Broncos fit, and if you were the Broncos heading into the offseason, what would you do in terms of finding the pieces to have them kind of close whatever gap exists between them and the Seahawks and Patriots?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two positions they love to address would be the running back and tight end positions. The challenge is kind of where they are in the draft. I don't know how that's going to fall for them. One name I would keep an eye on there as we kind of go through the combine and go through the spring. I have Jeremiah Love is going to be long gone, but his teammate Jadarian Price, I wouldn't be surprised if as we go through the process, he were to kind of jump into the back of the first round discussion and become potentially an option there. Someone who also has some kick return value, but I think he could be a number one back. If he was playing anywhere else, he would have been. Just happened to be playing with Jeremiah Love, but he's got vision and balance. He breaks tackles. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. Didn't get as many opportunities because of Love, but he's someone that I think's got a chance to be a 3-down complete back, which would be a great pairing with Harvey for that group. And then I think tight end wise, whether or not they look for that in free agency or, could be something in later rounds they could look to address. But those are two positions I think to get better offensively, they need more. And then, when it comes to CJ Allen, he's, it's a case of when you're going through that process, he's just one of the best players, available and who's going to run. I think he'll run in like the 4.5s once we get a chance to see him in Indy. He's just a real physical player. This is a fast defense, a lot of fastballs. And then what that can do is sometimes it can create a little bit of space there. And he can suck it up. He can do it with speed. He can do it with physicality. He's the communicator for that defense. He can kind of be the nerve center. He's someone I talking to their coaches there and said he got there in the spring. All these freshmen now, they all show up in the spring before their freshman year, so technically should still be a high school kid. And he said this guy was making like every tackle in practice as 17, 18-year-old kid who should be a senior in high school. So he arrived on the scene ready to go at Georgia, and I think he'd be a great fit.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep.
Next question comes from Eric Branch in San Francisco. Eric, you may ask your question.
Hey, Daniel. So I've determined at 27 the Niners will take a speed wide receiver or an edge rusher like of the Bosa's, their preferred Bosa size, 6'5", 265, something like that. If I'm right, who would make sense, between those two positions,
Yeah. Well, you just gave me the menu. I'm just going to go shopping on the menu that you just gave me. So, if you're looking for that big physical rusher that kind of fits those specs, to me, Zion Young he's 6'5" and a quarter, 262 pounds. He would fit those specs. I know TJ Parker's not quite that as big, but he's almost 6'4", 263 pounds out of Clemson. Both those guys can kind of be heavy edge setters, but can really rush with a lot of power and strength off the edge. So those would be two from the edge rusher group. And then in terms of the receivers, looking for somebody who can really, really run. There's going to be a lot of options there. Casey Concepcion from Texas A&M's got elite speed. He's got a couple punt return touchdowns to throw in the mix. He runs away from everybody. He's got some route polish to him as well. The thing with him is just the drops. He had 7 drops this year. So you're going to have to live with some of that, but he's going to give you the explosive plays to go along with it. But that's somebody who would fit that real speed portion of it. I think Denzel Boston is probably gone by then. He's going to give you the combination of both because he's going to be 6'3", close to 210 pounds, and he's going to run. I bet he runs in the 4.4s, mid 4.4s at that size. He's going to jump really well. He can win at the line of scrimmage against press. He's a red zone weapon. He can play above the rim. He can adjust in the middle of the field. He's a point scorer. So he reminded me a lot of Cortland Sutton. I think he would be he'd be a fun one to have if he were to make it that far. We'll see.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Matthew Perino. Matthew, you may ask your question.
Hey, Daniel. Thanks for doing this. If you look at the last 3 receivers the Bills have drafted, Justin Shorter, Keon Coleman, and Caden Prather, It's like 3 straight drafts of just not having success at the position. If you're in that room and you're spending the last few months evaluating this group, what kind of changes are you making to evaluate this group? And then the second part of it is, they try to trade for Jalen Waddle, Brian Thomas Jr. reportedly at the deadline last year. What kind of targets day 2, day 3 could you see being kind of fits in that mold of player, if there are any?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think they've been trying to find a bigger guy. I think they love what they have in Khalil Shakir, and just trying to find the perfect complement to him on the outside. And they've swung and just haven't been able to hit on it. Whether or not some of that is a lack of maturity with players, or just the ability not matching what the evaluation was. I think there's open to interpretation there. But I look at guys in that range where they're picking here. Let me see, what pick are they in the second round? Buffalo is picking 60. So if I'm looking at that range, Malachi Fields probably gone from Notre Dame. Chris Bell, you might get a discount on from Louisville. He's coming off of an ACL injury, but he's a really good player who's thick and strong and powerful. He can go get it down the field. He's physical at the top of routes. He's sudden after the catch. He does not go down easy. But he's, you might catch a value with him potentially there at that point in time. Other guys who are kind of bigger, get into that, you might get more into the 3rd round range where you get to some of those other bigger guys. Reggie Virgil from Texas Tech's a good option. Josh Cameron, who's a big, tough, strong kid, a little stiff, but he's got punt return value as well out of Baylor. He's a good player. I thought he was like Mac Hollins plus, so there'll be some familiarity of what that looks like there. But Ted Hurst from Georgia State, who's not going to the combine, surprisingly, he's got big speed outside and can go get the ball. So kind of those bigger guys, you get to Elijah Surratt in that mix as well at Indiana, maybe not as fast, but can wall guys off and win. I think they've got to find a bigger body when you get in big games and 3rd downs and clutch moments when there's not a lot of space. Can you get a ball? You have a ball winner, and I think that's what they've got to find, whether that's a free agent or whether that's in the draft.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yep.
Next question comes from Michael Middlehurst Schwartz. Michael, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, thanks for doing this. You touched
problem.
on this a few questions ago talking about Howell, but just wanted to ask you about all the talk about arm length for linemen and edge rushers kind of reaching a flashpoint as of late with Will Campbell last year and through the playoffs, and then maybe Rueben Bain and Howell this year. Obviously, evaluations are different for offensive tackles versus edge rushers. But with you mentioning that this matters to teams, what do you think is a proper way to account for a guy at either of those spots falling short of desired arm length thresholds, and how do you think that dynamic might play out this year?
Well, everybody has different thoughts on it. Some teams are going to be more strict on it than others. I always go back to the old scout had told me when I had first started scouting, and it was advice when I was watching a player from a small school. He's like, if you're watching a Division II player, so a great exercise is don't look up his name or number. And within the first 15 plays, if you can't find the NFL prospect, then he's not an NFL prospect. So I take that into the arm length conversation, which is if you didn't know their arm length and you watched 4 games on a guy, and you never thought that there was an issue of guys getting to his chest or playing short-armed, then I wouldn't be as concerned about it. But when you have issues of guys getting edged, or you have defensive linemen who they can't get to the body of anybody, then it's like, okay, well, I've got some concerns. By the way, what's his arm length? Well, his arm length, he's got short arms. Okay, well, he kind of plays to that. So I think when there's a marriage between it and what you see on the field, then you should definitely, factor that into the evaluation. It's going to be fascinating with the D lineman this year because Bain's tape is outstanding, and he's going to have short arms. I mentioned Cassius Howell, so a really, really good player with short arms. I've talked to people that aren't as concerned about Cassius Howell. I've talked to other people that have, with teams that go watch him against Miami, against those big monsters, and like he can't really do anything against them. I went back and watched it. Well, there's not a ton of pure pass rush opportunities there because Beck's getting the ball out quick. They even ran some non-traditional formation stuff. and just didn't have quite as many opportunities. But I can kind of see some reps in there where he looks a little small and plays a little small at times. So it's all got to be kind of factored into it. But I'd have a hard time taking a worse player just because he has long arms, is how I would finish that.
Next question comes from Clifton Brown with the Ravens. Clifton, you may ask your question.
Yeah, Daniel, assuming the top 3 pass rushers that you mentioned earlier, Reese, Bailey, and Bain are gone, could you see the Ravens jumping on another pass rusher at 14? And what are some of the characteristics that we might look for with Jesse Minter and what he's looking for to get the most out of the Ravens pass rush? Because he had a lot of success getting guys in LA to play up to or over their ability as pass rushers.
Yeah, I don't know that he has a specific type. I mean, you can look at it last year with the Chargers team. That defense was good and that he coordinated, where you had a little more of the heavier handed physical edge setters with Khalil Mack and Tuli Tuipulotu. And then Owe comes over and has 7.5 sacks after the trade and has 3 sacks in the playoffs. And he's a totally different style of player who's a little more speed based off the edge. So I think Jesse Minter is going to want a really, really good football player. I know Baltimore has historically, and obviously that's where he has ties, going back, but you can go back 20 years. They've always liked guys who were, stronger, physical, heavier set guys on the edge. And maybe that's one of the reasons why Owe, they didn't hold on to him and decided to move him. But, when you look at those types of guys, I think we used to always use the phrase play like a Raven. I know they still do it, but like Hakeem Mesidor, he plays like a Raven. It would be probably a little early at that point in time, but if you were to trade back, our Mason Thomas from Oklahoma, I would say plays like that as well. Those are just kind of real physical, violent players off the edge that match the types of guys that they've historically had there.
Next question comes from Jordan Ham. Jordan, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, thanks for doing this. Wanted to ask you about the 4 Arizona State guys invited to the Combine between Jordan Tyson, Maxie Honachor, Keith Abney, and Keyshawn Elliott. What do those guys need to do in the pre-draft process to help up their draft stock ahead of this? Yeah, with Tyson, I mean, I think just getting comfortable from a medical standpoint and showing that he's healthy. And, that's really been kind of the one criticism on him is just the injuries that he's battled, throughout his college career. But the tape is outstanding. I would imagine if he goes through a whole testing process, he's going to test excellent because he's super dynamic and explosive. There's plays where he just like floats in the air when I watched him. So he's, I would imagine he's going to jump out of the gym, real electric with his change of direction. He's a creative playmaker. So to me, it's just really the medical stuff with him. Honachor, he should be on easy street because he played really, really well at the Senior Bowl. He knocked out, I'm sure he's interviewed with all 32 teams when he was down there. So he should have a little bit of a lighter load in terms of visiting with teams at the Combine. So he can just kind of focus on going out there, having a good workout and testing well, which I imagine he will. He's just a real athletic, powerful guy. His stock is definitely on the rise for somebody who played 1 year of football in junior college to be where he is right now. It's a great story. Having moved over here as a 13-year-old from Nigeria, and just the climb is there. He's getting better and better. Every time I watched him in the fall to when I saw him at the Senior Bowl, from the beginning of the week to the end of the week, this guy just keeps getting better and better. So he just continues to ride that wave. And then with Abney, I'm curious to see how big he is. I just have estimates at 6 foot, $190. I think he's probably a little smaller than that, but the inside-outside ability, I think he's one of the better nickels in the draft. He's got short area quickness. He's got excellent eyes. Seeing how he jumps will be interesting. There's times he got a little bit outsized down the field, but he's a really, really good player. I don't know that he has anything really, really to prove there. And then Elliott, you asked about, as an inside linebacker. Does a really good job as a rusher. He got 7 sacks. He beats running backs. He can cover backs in the flat. I'm just curious to see like the overall, the twitch explosiveness that'll show up in, broad vertical testing stuff, just to see what type of an athlete he is there. But
someone who's got, really, really good at going after quarterbacks as a linebacker.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Ben Standig in DC. Ben, you may ask your question.
Hey, Daniel, thanks for doing this, of course. Washington, you may have heard, needs some help on defense. They've got, of course, a new defensive coordinator in Durante Jones. We're kind of guessing he might bring over some of the Brian Flores scheme, but we'll see. There are a lot of guys who got the edge guys. You have Reese going to them at 7 in your last mock. You got Bain, of course, Bailey, Caleb Downs, Styles, perhaps, maybe a corner. Which do you think is sort of the best fit for what we think Durante Jones is going to look to bring to Washington?
Well, I think if you look at the Flores defense, a lot gets talked about the design, the creativity, the aggressiveness. But, you look at having, corners that can hold up there, that can play the ball. And I think it all starts, though, with guys who can win up front. So even with all the design of it, I still think you want guys who can win one-on-one as pass rushers. And I think that's the biggest need for this team. So I would love for, a Rueben Bain to be there. I don't think Bailey or Reese will be there as we get closer. We'll see. I mean, if any of those three guys, I'd be elated if you could pull one of those guys. And then Downs is someone who can kind of create the chaos or orchestrate the chaos as someone who's highly, highly intelligent. Everybody's gonna have a need for that and use for that. But I think, as complex as you want to get, having guys that can win up front on the defensive line when you get them those opportunities to rush one-on-one with the scheme is big. And then I think having, smart guys who can play the ball and you kind of orchestrate things, I think there's value there as well. So they're in a good spot. The good thing is good news, bad news. Bad news is you got a lot of needs. The good news is you're going to definitely fill one of them here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question comes from Tim Twentyman with the Lions. Tim, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, thanks as always. In your recent mock, you had the Lions going edge with Parker. I was just curious if you considered them going tackle there, and if you did, just with obviously everything going on with Taylor Decker in that decision, if you did consider tackle, what are some names that could be sitting there at 17 that could maybe be guys that could step in and play, and just your overall impression of this tackle class? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like they've been doing a lot of homework on free agent tackles. So, I mean, that shows you that they're, we'll see what happens with Decker, but it feels like there could definitely be a need there. When you're looking at pick 17, Monroe Freeling makes a lot of sense there as someone who's, kind of got the excellent size. There's some torque and physicality and aggressiveness to him, the way he plays. I like Blake Miller a lot. I would imagine the fact that he's 54 starts, high school wrestler, 35-inch arms. He's going to bench over 30, probably jump over 30. I would imagine that would be popular and highly thought of there in that room for the kind of stuff they value. But those two guys, to me, would make a lot of sense. On Freeling as a player, just to give you an idea about him, I mean, it's the unique combination of mom as a yoga instructor, which I think I would always love for an offensive lineman to have a mom as a yoga instructor in terms of the flexibility stuff. But in talking to their offensive line coach in Stacy Searles, he was telling me a story about how he has a high ankle, supposed to be out for several weeks. And the next week they play Auburn and said, hey, if there's an emergency, could we use you? Yeah, absolutely, coach. And he said the kid ends up going out there and playing 63 snaps in that game. So kind of speaks to his toughness and competitiveness and kind of feels Dan Campbell-y to me. So that one would make a lot of sense.
Next question comes from Eric Smith with the Chargers. Eric, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, always appreciate your time. With the Chargers at 22, obviously a team that you know well, what are the different directions you think we could go in the first round as we go into year 3 with Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz?
Well, just knowing Joe for as long as I have and knowing how he came up and what his core beliefs are, I think there's a couple things. That the line of scrimmage is always going to be something he continues to invest in, and he's going to take the best player. He's not going to worry about necessarily what you have in certain spots. They try and, sign some of their own guys in free agency, see what they can do with some of the cap space they have to go out and solve some needs that way. But you go back to the time in Baltimore when it's a Baltimore organization that took Jonathan Ogden when they didn't have a need at tackle. They took Todd Heap when they didn't have a need at tight end. They took Jamal Lewis when they didn't have a need at running back. So they're not going to pass on a great player that would happen to fall in their lap. So in the last one, I think I had them taking Sadiq as a tight end, as just a real creative piece you could use. With Arondé Gadsden and him out there, you'd have two pretty dynamic weapons to go along with Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston and Trey Harris. Like you'd have a lot of toys for a very creative new offensive coordinator there. So I think they can just kind of sit tight and see how it falls. But I would imagine, the interior of the offensive line, something that can be addressed in free agency, and the interior of the offensive line, just in terms of value, matches up more, with day 2 for me than it would necessarily with that first pick. When you look at where they are in the second and third round, they're picking 55 and 86. I think they could find, if they wanted to, they could find 2 starters with those picks. So again, that's kind of the way I see it. I don't see them leaving the first 3 rounds without an offensive lineman. No matter what they do in free agency, I would imagine they can position themselves if they have to, if they need to trade back or trade up or whatever they need to do. They'll be able to address that.
Next question comes from Michael McQuaid in Ireland. Michael, you may ask your question.
How's it going? It's the biggest year ever for players attending the combine with the international player pathway. Obviously, it's growing massively year on year. I think over 25 players this year, just in the cohort. We obviously seen defensive coordinator Aidan Durden with the Seahawks there, winning a couple of weeks ago. For you and for all the insight that you have year on year, how passionate are you about the growth of this international pathway for not just the combine, but the draft? And do you expect this to be a real focus of growth on this draft cycle going forward?
I love the question, and I think it's been an area of emphasis for the league. Obviously, I do the Charger game, so I've got to travel around, been to Brazil, been to Mexico City, been to London, and these teams just continuing to go all over the globe to play, I think is very, very important, not just for growing an audience, but for growing, some future players. There's athletes everywhere. If you look at the NBA and where all the players come from, a great example of where you can find athletes. So getting more people to play this great game all over the globe and then giving them opportunities and seeing success stories like Jordan Mailata. There's a lot more of those guys out there. And so, as excited, I know the league, I'm sure, is excited about the growth and the eyeballs and the popularity. But from a scouting standpoint, look at all the other sports. Look at baseball and what they've done in Latin America over decades and decades and decades. There are great football players out there outside, the borders of the United States that we're going to have an opportunity to see, I think, over the years to come. I think that's only going to get bigger as the sport gets more and more popular. But if you're an NFL team and you're not doing your homework on the talent internationally, you better load up and start getting ready for that, because I think we're going to see some real growth there, and it's an exciting opportunity. It's a great chance to find an edge as a team to find some talent.
Thanks, man.
Yep.
Next question comes from Antoine Staley in New York. Antoine, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, I just wanted to get your thoughts about just the unique situation that the Jets are in, having 4 picks in the top 44, and also what they can do about their constant cycle, it seems like, at quarterback.
Oh man, how long do we have? We got to get the quarterback thing figured out. I don't know what the right answer is this year. I was thinking about them. You're not taking a quarterback at 2 or 16, in my opinion. If you want to take a flyer at 33 or 44, I don't even love that, to be honest. I was looking at a couple names. Like, I would kick the tires on. I don't know if they'd be available, but for Frank Reich there, I was thinking about McKee with the Eagles. Like, what would that cost? I was thinking about Davis. Why am I blanking on his name now? With the Texans.
Davis Mills.
Davis Mills. Yeah, Davis Mills. Thank you. I've got all these 26 draft names just jammed in my head. Those are a couple guys I'd be curious about taking a flyer on for a year if you could trade a mid-round pick. I don't think I would lean in the direction of the draft for their quarterback this year. I think they will be all in for that next year. They're obviously armed with ammunition in that draft, and I wouldn't be surprised if, if 33, which is always, a pick that I think has some value as teams go to sleep and come back and look at who's still on the board, and they could, trade down and pick up another asset in next year's draft. I think that would make some sense, but you can just plug a lot of different holes in this draft. And to me, it would be along the line of scrimmage. If you can get the offensive line, which has already got some good young pieces, finish that thing out, continue to add to this defensive line, and you can add to, receiver, corner. There's other things you can add in there. But if you go into next year with a bunch of picks and your offensive line's in good shape and your defensive line's in good shape, and you can find your quarterback of the future at that point in time, I think that's the right way to go. And who knows, maybe you hit the lottery on one of these younger veterans that you would try and get. But that makes more sense to me than trying to force it on a quarterback in the draft.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question comes from Emma Feiner in Toledo. Emma, you may ask your question.
Hey, Daniel. I know you talked a lot about Emmanuel McNeil-Warren coming out of Toledo. I just wanted to get some of your thoughts on the two other prospects. I know Toledo's had a great recent history with defensive backs, but could you go more into what you expect to see from Andre Fuller and Avery Smith at the Combine, especially with Avery having only started at corner for 1 year after switching from quarterback?
Yeah, no, they've done a heck of a job there. And one of the things that's been cool is hearing the stories about the opportunities, that these guys have had over the last few years to leave and take big cash payouts. And they didn't leave. They wanted to stay with their guys. They love the culture that they have there. And it's obviously worked out so far. And I'm excited to see this group. So of the other guys, McNeil-Warren I mentioned is one of my favorites. But Andre Fuller, outside, he's big. He's almost 6'1", 201 pounds. He can find and play the ball down the field. He can stay on the hip. He does a nice job of playing the hands, playing the pocket. The change of direction, agility stuff, I thought was average. I'm anxious to see how he does, testing wise with that. He'll wrestle and tackle to the ground. He's tough there. Not a ton of production with the one interception, but someone who I thought had some good football ahead of him. And then Avery Smith outside, for not as experienced there, does a nice job buzzing under routes. He's got some stop-start quickness. He's got some, some aggressiveness and some toughness off the edge. You'll see some TFLs pop up there. Just the question was the pure deep speed, and he has some missed tackles in space. But I love his want to. I love his quickness. He's an interesting player there at just over 5'10", 195 pounds. I thought, these guys are day three picks, but you've got something to work with for sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question comes from Chris Franklin. Chris, you may ask your question.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, DJ, for doing this. When you look at the Giants, it looks like there's been a lot of talk for the wide receiver being the prime pick. I know you had Carnell Tate being the guy. Who would you guys use if they do go that way in the day two, for second round? Who's a guy that would fit Denard Wilson's system that you think would be impactful for them?
Yeah, what position you want to look at?
I mean, they could use help in the secondary for sure.
yeah, no question. He wants to get after you up front, so you get secondary players. I'll give you some corner options here. They are picking 37, so that's a nice high pick there in the second round. Oh gosh, I mean, Avian Terrell is a playmaker. I mentioned him as someone who plays inside. I think he can play outside as well. He does both there in college, but a real high on the nickel board. But that's kind of the range of where he goes. Cisse from South Carolina, super explosive. He might run in the 4.2s. Like he's got a lot of juice there. But those would be two guys that are kind of in that range for where they could go. If you go back a little bit further, yeah, I really like Kilgore from South Carolina. A kid from Arizona Arizona's got their whole secondary, I think, is in this draft, but they've got a really good player there in Traden Stukes, who's a little bit older. I think probably goes in the third round. So where they're picking, they don't have a third, so that'd be kind of a trade back scenario. But he's another one that's a good player. But the two, if they're going to stick and pick at 37, the two names I would kind of boil it down to, the way I see it, is more Terrell and Cisse from. So either Clemson or South Carolina, same state. Go shopping for one of those two guys.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep.
Next question comes from Donnie Druin. Donnie, you may ask your question.
Hey DJ, appreciate you taking time to do this. And also condolences to your desk that shattered the other day.
Oh, dude, I got a new one, baby. This thing's great, and it goes up and down. It's I'm way too excited about this new desk.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'm asking you a Cardinals question here. I mean, there's a bunch of different options. They can go edge, tackle, whatever it might be at number 3. Obviously, free agency is going to tell us a lot about what they want to do, but I'm just curious, like, what your overall kind of direction is as of right now of what you think they'll do when they're on the clock.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the quarterback thing's not going to be solved there, so figure out what they're doing from that standpoint at that point in time. I don't know that there's a wrong answer between a tackle and an edge rusher. I would, if it was like, what would I do? I always tell people, like, I do these mock drafts off what I hear and what I think might happen. It's not necessarily exactly how I would do it. I think the value for where they're picking is, points to the edge rushers. That's the guys that are going to carry the higher grade. So that would be the direction that I would go. And if you assume, as we all do, that Fernando Mendoza is off the board, man, you've got your pick of those 3 guys. And I don't know there's a wrong answer with the 3 of them. Reese, I would say, just because organizationally they haven't had as much success with a high pick on a guy who's, maybe a little positionless. So Reese, maybe that dings him a little bit in the room there. But David Bailey and Rueben Bain, either one of those guys, I think would be an outstanding fit there. And they're like plug and play, and they both give you some real pass rush off the edge. So that's kind of the area that I would look.
Next question comes from Ryan McFadden. Ryan, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
All right, good. Once again, thanks for doing this. My question here is on Raiders and Mendoza. Last time the Raiders was in this position, drafted first overall, was in 2007, and they paired Jamarcus Russell with first-time head coach Lane Kiffin. Nearly 20 years later, they're kind of in the same position with Mendoza and their first-time head coach and Clint Kubiak. I was wondering, what about Clint Kubiak as a coach from a scheme standpoint and as a coaching standpoint, and Mendoza as a player? Why do you feel like that partnership can work well and can possibly translate to success in Las Vegas?
Well, I definitely think it can work. And when you look at what he does, some of the movement stuff, the under center, moving the quarterback around a little bit, Mendoza's fully capable of doing that. He's got a strong arm to be able to, throw the deep over routes and the different, things you want to do within that system. I don't think there's any limitations there. But I think the most important thing is, and not just specific to Jamarcus Russell, but I would say Jamarcus Russell's decision making was troublesome, and that in a lot of different areas it didn't work out for him. Mendoza to me is an excellent decision maker, and where Russell is as talented of a thrower as I've ever evaluated ever. I've never seen anybody throw the football like he did. Right, to me, Mendoza is going to operate within the structure of this offense very well, and he's going to make really, really good decisions. So I think that's got a chance to really, really work out. And he's also, however much volume you want to put on him, he can swallow a lot of volume as well. He's an incredibly bright kid. So I think he was offered to Yale in football. So he's got a chance to be a really good player there. And I like that marriage with the coach and the quarterback.
Next question comes from Anthony Cosenza. Anthony, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Hey, thanks for doing this and appreciate the time. Just got a little bit of a question for the Cincinnati Bengals. I know it's going to be a heavy defensive offseason, but looking maybe mid-rounds for some sort of effective slot receiving option. I think the offense really operated best when it had Tyler Boyd along with Higgins and Jamar Chase. Not that you're going to maybe find a Boyd in that range, but someone that can be an effective chain mover, twitchy guy, and just another ancillary weapon in that offense.
If I could put a master plan together and you told me I could have pick number 41 to get that accomplished, I would run Omar Cooper Jr.'s name up to the podium out of Indiana. I tweeted out the other day, he's like the Ramseyest receiver, like meant as a compliment of someone who's just incredibly tough and strong. They like to use the term being grounded through the catch, like your cleats are in the ground, you catch everything on the run, you have confidence in your hands, you're not leaving your feet and corralling the ball with your body, which gives you an opportunity to do some things with it after the catch. He's got a really strong lower body. Everybody's going to, highlight the game winner against Penn State and the incredible catch. I saw a catch against Illinois in the middle of the field where he got drilled, where I thought was even more impressive than that game winner. And then all the stuff you hear about him, from a character standpoint, is elite, off the charts. So if I could put Omar Cooper Jr. in that offense with those two other wide receivers, with Chase and Higgins, yeah, sign me up for that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Mookie Alexander. Mookie, you may ask your question.
Hey, Daniel, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Well, I'm doing fantastic. I'm still on that Super
By the
Bowl
way,
hunt.
as a Padre fan, you're already my favorite Mookie, so you're already at the top of the list. I think I lost you. Oh, there you are.
Okay, there we go. So for the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks, they have important decisions to make on free agent corners Josh Jobe and Reek Woolen, and it seems highly likely that Woolen will not be retained. And losing him also means losing those special physical traits with his height, his speed, and his length. You said a few days ago, and you just reiterated it today, that there are a lot of day two starting cornerbacks in this draft. So are there any who stand out to you, even as early as pick 32, which is pretty much day two adjacent, who could be suitable replacements specifically for Reek Woolen in Mike McDonald's defense?
I'll give you a couple names. It wouldn't be at 32. It would be with the next pick. So when we look at their next pick, number is 64. So I obviously do the math there. 64, give you a couple names. Julian Neal from Arkansas, who's 6'1.5", 202 pounds. He's big and long. He's an efficient mover. He can high point and play the ball. He can run and carry vertical routes. He's got recoverability. He's physical. You see some big hits on tape. The toughness there. Had 2 picks. He's in that range for me. Another big kid is out of Florida, and Devin Moore, and I don't have the officials on him, so we'll see at the combine. But listed the numbers I got from scouts was right around 6'3", just under 200 pounds. Big, plays that kind of high side shuffle technique. He's comfortable in press. He can play through the wide receiver to the ball. He's a good blitzer. You can watch him against Texas. Drills Arch Manning in that one, and then has another impressive play in that game where he wheels and finds the ball for a pick. So kind of gave you the line of scrimmage toughness as well as some ball skills down the field. But those are 2 big corners that are probably right in that range where they are at bottom of 2.
All right. Thank you, Daniel.
Sure.
Next question comes from John Sokolov. John, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ. I know you had mentioned Garrett Nussmeier a little while ago, obviously with a very interesting season he had. Where do you kind of see him landing via the draft, and how much did the Senior Bowl think maybe help or, impact his stock?
Yeah, he had a really good game and a solid week down there. So definitely helped himself. And, with the son of a coach, he's going to do great through, the interview process and from really the end of the season forward. So it was a nice rebound for him. Pretty wild to see the combine list and see the number of LSU players going and just the way that year kind of got away from him. But, nice to see him back healthy and kind of back on the uptick here. So I think, to me, I like him as a 3rd round pick. I feel like that's a sweet spot for him. But, we've seen in years past that guys can get elevated. So, maybe there's a chance he goes in the 2nd round. But to me, I like him more as a 3rd round player who's got a real interesting skill set in terms of the compact delivery. He can climb up in the pocket. He's real comfortable with no foot space. For a guy who's not big, who's just 6'1", sometimes those guys play small in crowds, but he's very comfortable in there. He doesn't need a lot of foot space to operate. He's really, really tough, and he's got plenty of arm. It was butt cold at the Senior Bowl, man. Like it was windy and it was cold, and it didn't seem to have much of an effect on him, which is a great sign for him going forward. So I like him as a 3rd round type player, but again, somebody does that in the second round. I kind of compared him earlier to Andy Dalton, and that's where he came off the board.
Next question comes from Kelsey Russo. Kelsey, you may ask your question.
Hi, Daniel. For the Browns, specifically with 2 picks in the first round and then a high second round pick, obviously, with the main focus on the offensive side of the ball, where would you see kind of their direction in with those 2 first round picks, kind of looking at offensive line and wide receiver?
Yeah, I mean, they don't have an offensive line. So, I mean, like that's, you gotta 5 guys to run out there. So that's where, we'll see what they can accomplish in free agency, but they've got to have a heavy investment there. I think there's, two offensive tackles that are in that range up there, with Maui Noah and Fanu. But there's also opportunities for them if they wanted to wait. They could get one at 24. I propose the idea of doing both, of just getting your 2 tackles there and not really relying on DeJuan Jones to stay healthy going forward. And if somehow he surprised you and stays healthy and played at some crazy elite level and you wanted to kick one of the other 2 guys inside, you could do that. But to me, the offensive line is a place I would be looking. Where they are, they're kind of, I think the best offensive lineman in the draft is the Penn State interior offensive lineman, Ioane. But where they're positioned and where they picked, not going to be there at 24. And I don't think you're going to take the interior lineman at 6. So maybe that's a name that if you were to maneuver around a little bit. If you told me that let me give you the perfect draft. If they took Maui Noah and that was their first pick out of Miami, and then they were to move up a little bit from 24, and I know people will say don't move up for a guard, that's a no-no, but man, you could end up with Ioane and Maui Noah. You've all of a sudden got 2 really, really dominant, potentially 2 dominant players for that offensive line.
Thank you.
Yep.
This question comes from Zach Gilbert. Zach, you may ask your question.
Hey, GJ, I just wanted to ask you about the Kansas City Chiefs at number 9 there. You said that Jeremiah Love is one of your favorite players in the draft. Can you just expand on why you think Love would be such a great fit there in the Chiefs backfield?
Yeah, I've just kind of felt like that was a missing piece for them. I think the Chiefs and Tyreek Hill, with him being back in the news and being released, and we'll see if he ends up back in Kansas City. But I think he was a really key player in that offense, was a really key contributor to a change in the game. I really think because of how explosive and dynamic that Chiefs team was, you saw this, shell coverage kind of take over the league. 2 high looks, willing to concede some yards underneath in the passing game and even in the running game. And just, we're not going to let you throw the ball over our heads. We're not going to give up explosive plays. That was really kind of a direct result to how dynamic that Chiefs offense was, and in some degree the Rams as well. But I always thought that, man, if you had, with the looks that they see, if you had a dynamic back who not only can run the ball and make you pay for those looks, but someone with the safeties and everybody's so deep, if you had, one-on-one routes, like the best matchup in football would be Jeremiah Love against a linebacker. You get a chance to get explosive without having to throw the ball down the field. So they have been, that offense in Kansas City has been everything quick underneath because of the looks they're getting, but they haven't been able to make people pay for those looks. And I think this is an opportunity as a runner and as a receiver to really, really make some teams pay for how they play Kansas City.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Jimmy Kempski. Jimmy, you may ask your question.
Hey, Daniel, how you doing? Eagles question. They've been heavy on defense in the draft the last 4 years. Offense, they've paid big money to their established players. A lot of those guys are getting older, showing signs of decline. So that'll likely flip, and that they'll have to pay the guys on defense, reload on offense through the draft. So I guess just a general question is, do you just have a handful of players, any position on offense, who you think make particular sense to them in the first 2 days?
Yeah, I mean, I like big guys early for them. Where they're picking, I just mentioned Ioane. I don't think he'll be there from Penn State, but he'd be a heck of a pick if he somehow got there to 23. It's the same tackle group we've talked about.
with Monroe Freeling, Blake Miller, Caden Proctor from Alabama is an interesting one. Like all those guys would give them some options there along the offensive line with their first pick. If you go to their next pick, pick 54, you want to find a tight end. I've talked about Max Clare, could give them a young tight end. They've got pick 68. You want to find an offensive lineman that you can develop and somebody you can work with. There's a big old dude down at Texas A&M and Demetrius Crownover, who's almost 6'7", 331 pounds, just massive. He's got some work to do. He's a little bit raw. He got exposed a little bit by Bain in that Miami group, but he is a big, powerful guy who kind of falls in that third round range, and they love big offensive linemen there. So could be a perfect scenario where you get Lane back for one more year. You don't have to put Crownover on the field, but you get a chance to eventually have an answer there at right tackle. So to me, I think big guys and the offensive line, something that makes a lot of sense for Howie and company.
Thanks. Appreciate you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Phil Thompson. Phil, you may ask your question.
Daniel, good to meet you, and thanks for doing this. Appreciate
No problem.
it. No problem. And so going back to the Bears, I want to ask you to elaborate on why you prioritize DT, Peter Woods, and if the chatter around Max Crosby affects that decision, and if they might address safety with the second pick that they have.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love those top three safeties, so I'd have no problem whatsoever if one of those three safeties are there. I think you're going to see all those guys have some buzz and juice once we come out of the combine. But the defensive tackle to me was finding somebody that had the quickness and the twitch to be able to get on the other side of the line of scrimmage and make some difference making plays. Peter Woods, that to me is, he's real dynamic and quick with how he operates there. And I think, that's about the range of where he goes. I think you're seeing him kind of go through the process where teams are really excited about him coming into the year. And then, it was a good year, but it didn't quite take that huge leap that everybody would have thought. But there's still a lot of twitch and explosiveness in there. And that's why I thought I wasn't thinking about Max Crosby, to be honest, when I put him in there as that pick. But there's defensive tackle options for him there. I'm a big fan of Lee Hunter from Texas Tech, but I think even with Peter Woods, you might get a little bit more upfield penetration and negative plays there with him. So that's why I went in that direction. But there'll be good edge rushers there. It's such a deep group and a deep class. They'll have opportunities at that spot as well. So they're well positioned for where they are.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Next question comes from Nolan Bianchi. Nolan, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, thanks for doing this.
No problem.
Sorry about that. Lions general manager Brad Holmes, he's kind of told us that, he's strict on drafting best player available. Sometimes it feels like they do target positions of need, though. When you're trying to get in the mind of Brad Holmes and project what the Lions might do, what are some factors that you consider based on what they've done previously?
Well, I mean, I don't think they give 2 cents about what any outside opinion is on anything. I think they've got their beliefs and their conviction and they stick to it. I would say the theme has been, explosive. They've taken explosive players and they've taken very, very physical players. And, when they get their best ones, when you get your, Hutchinson's, your Penei Sewells, you get both. You'd say the same with Gibbs and some of the other big hits that they've had there. But Jack Campbell will be another one. So that would kind of be the type of player I would just say are just explosive, fast guys that are pretty dynamic. So, where they're picking at 17, I've looked at their needs along the offensive line, but if you want to add an edge rusher as well, and you say, okay, well, who are the explosive players, coming off the edge at pick number 17? Well, Cassius Howell is super explosive, like might run in the 4.4s type explosive. And then Mesidor is someone who's incredibly tough and physical, not as quite as juicy, but he would fit the toughness component there. So Those are a couple names. R. Mason Thomas is another one where that would be kind of a Lions pick, where I think most people view him as a second round pick, but he's such a good player. He plays with energy and power. He plays with burst. He's got an edge to him. He's someone who could climb up in the process, and that, as I'm kind of staring at it and looking at it, that actually kind of looks like a Lions type player.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next question comes from Parker Gabriel. Parker, you may ask your question.
Hey, DJ, thanks for doing this.
No problem.
With the Broncos picking 30th, obviously, maybe not even at that spot, but you mentioned the tight end class, and I'm wondering, they've obviously struggled to find kind of like a Y all-around type of guy. Are there some guys you think, even if it's day 2, that could project to being, starters right away or down the road in the tight end class, and who might sort of fit that role for them?
Yeah, I mean, one interesting name I would throw out there would be Roush from Stanford, who, you talk about a traditional Y. He's one of the best blockers of the group. He's almost 6'6", 260 pounds. Just a really, really good blocker, stays connected. He finishes. The thing with him is he's actually a pretty smooth mover and moves well for his size. And he's just had some drops. He had 7 drops this year, so not quite as consistent. That'll probably ding him a little bit as you go through the process. They pick Denver's 3rd pick is 94, around that range. Maybe he goes a little later than that, but that's kind of a traditional hand in the ground Y, I would say. One with some upside in that mix would be, Klein, I've talked about, from Michigan, who I think's got more ahead of him, but he's got that big frame to kind of be a hand in the ground guy as well. So those would be 2 that I think are kind of the mid-round guys. Max Clare is my favorite of the bunch, but that would be at pick 62. I think that's a great value for him, would be at pick 62 for Max Clare out of Ohio State.
Next question comes from Bill Huber. Bill, you may ask your question.
Yeah. Yep. How's it going, DJ?
Good, man.
So, you know what the Packers need: interior defensive linemen, maybe a center, cornerbacks. Without that first round pick, how would you attack rounds 2 and 3? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So when you're looking at interior offensive linemen, they're picking 52 and 84. I think there's good options there. Some of the players that I've mentioned, I think, Rutledge is one who I really, really like, who's, I think can play any of the 3 interior spots, is a good fit there. Dunker would definitely be a popular pick there out of Iowa, who's got the mullet and is almost 6'5", 320 pounds, played tackle, is going to play inside at guard. He's real physical and nasty. He's in that range as well. Hecht from K-State. The center, can play guards. He's a good interior player. Emmanuel Pregnon. From Oregon. There's a good group of interior guys, kind of in that range where they're picking in the 2nd round. The corners in the 3rd round. I would probably look at that group of interior linemen if you wanted somebody to play right away in the 2nd round, and knowing that the corners, that pool is a little deeper when you get into the 3rd round, and we'll see like Dalen Everett from Georgia. We'll see where Chris Johnson from San Diego State goes in that mix. Malik Muhammad from Texas. There's a bunch of guys in that mix there. I really like the kid from Duke too. Chandler Rivers is a good player. So I have a long list of corners with 3rd roundish grades. I would feel better about the interior guys doing that in the 2nd round if you're going to look at those 2 positions.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Next question comes from Alex Zeitlo. Alex, you may ask your question.
Hey, thanks, Daniel. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you.
Awesome. It's a Carolina Panthers question. The Panthers haven't drafted a linebacker in the 1st round since 2015 when they drafted Shaq Thompson, and then before that, Luke Kuechly in 2012. Looking at this draft class, could this be the year that they do that at pick number 19, or do you imagine they do that, or they fill that need somewhere else?
Well, I would say if somehow the league was dumb enough for Sonny Styles to fall there, Dan Morgan would lose his linebacker card if he didn't run that pick up there. But I don't think he's going to make it there. So, you're kind of looking at C.J. Allen, who's a good, would be a good value. That's right about where I have him. Anthony Hill Jr. from Texas, maybe a little early. But yeah, Styles would be the one that I would say if he got in range. Dan might have to move up and get him if that were to be the case. But I think that's something in free agency you could look at, or when you get into the middle rounds. I think there's really good depth at linebacker. I talked about the third round corner group. There's a good group of linebackers in that area of the draft as well. See where Kyle Lewis from Pitt, Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech, Betcher from Oregon, Heineke from Oklahoma, Trotter from Missouri. Like all those guys are kind of all in that range to me of like late second, early to mid third round. So if they wanted to go with a linebacker, I don't know that they would necessarily need to do that with their first pick, except for the Styles exception.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Next question comes from Nick Schultz. Nick, you may ask your question.
Hey DJ, thanks for doing this.
No problem.
You kind of touched on it a little bit earlier with the college landscape and realignment and everything, and I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on NIL and the transfer portal impacting decisions of prospects, whether it be good or bad going forward.
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting to kind of try and figure out, why guys moved around. I think somebody might be unmuted. I was talking to an SEC head coach the other day and said that they break it up into a couple different categories, which is guys transfer because they want money. Like there's the one bucket. There's guys that transfer because they want playing time because they're not getting opportunities. And there's guys transferring because they want to challenge themselves, like they're kind of moving up in level and competition. And, I think it's going to be interesting as we have more of data on this going forward, is if you were to kind of look at these different buckets and we can look back with the track record to see, which guys have had success. Is there anything to it? I don't know. I don't know yet. I don't think there's enough to go off of, but I do think 5 years from now, we're going to have a better feel for how do you categorize the guys as they've moved around, and what impact does it have? So I think we're a few years away from learning more about this whole thing. But I know from a scouting standpoint, I've actually, I feel like I have to whisper it, but I've kind of enjoyed it because I've got a chance to see guys in different systems. I've got a chance to see some lower level competition guys move up in competition, so I'm not having to make as big of a projection. I referenced, earlier, we're seeing with the quality of competition you're seeing each and every week. I think it makes it a little bit easier to see what you got there. And the other thing, we used to be, you don't know how many times I've sat in draft rooms over 8 years, and it was I'm worried about this guy with money. Like, we give this guy some money, and he's got some free time. Like, I don't know. Well, you don't have to wonder anymore. Like, these guys have had to navigate that and handle that. And you find out those that can and those that can't. So I think in some ways it's made scouting easier.
Thank you.
Yep.
Our final question comes from Ross McCorkle. Ross, you may ask your question.
Hey, Daniel. Thank you for your time today. And I just wanted to kind of zoom out on the draft class and a team like the Steelers, who have those 12 picks. The idea of trading up in the first round, how many blue chip talents are there this year? And what is the value of day two guys relative to the last couple classes?
I think it's a great question. I think it's a good day two. I would not anticipate the Steelers, parting with those picks to move up in this draft. First of all, I think they've done a really good job of investing in bigs. And usually you move up for quarterbacks or bigs, quarterbacks, pass rushers. Those are usually the ones you go up for, or a tackle. Well, they've invested, in the offense and defensive lines, and there's not a quarterback that's going to be worth chasing. So I don't really see them, moving up for any of these other guys. And I think that, the perimeter needs that they have, wide receiver, there'll be good options for them. If they want to go in the corner department, there's going to be, ways they can go there as well. So, or anywhere in the secondary. So, safety could be in the mix as well. So to me, I don't really see that as a direction. If anything, just because of the uncertainty of the quarterback position going off into the future, I would think that, they'd be more likely to put that car in reverse than to go forward just to get some extra assets either this year or next year. So I just don't think it would make a lot of sense for them.
That concludes today's call. Thank you, DJ, for the time, and thank you, media, for joining. To confirm, we will make the audio of this call available later today. Please follow at NFL Media on X for further updates. Finally, to confirm, Daniel will be available next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time at a podium in the Media Center in Indianapolis. Thank you, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.
But also just our broader sort of connection to our
Thank you.
demographic.
Thank you. Thank you.
You have a card? You know, I don't, but I do.